My name is William del Pilar, the conservative Latino, and I'm here with Big John. And we are both fantasy sports pioneers, and we are now with the rebirth of sportsgrumblings.com. Big John, it's always good to see you.
Always good to see you too, William. You know, you keep saying we're fantasy pioneers. I think one day we should show up at like pioneer regalia, like we're on the Oregon Trail or something. Put on a hat, maybe a corn cob pipe, maybe a scarf or something, and then some people dying of dysentery in the background.
Maybe somebody will toss us a few bucks because we're still waiting to collect those royalty checks, aren't we?
Oh yeah, that's true.
It's actually ironically not a lot of people that are still around the industry that helped start it. And some of these individuals have gone on to big things. Some of our pals have sold their companies for a good chunk of change. They've become legends. The cool thing about us is even though we've been out of that part of the sector, going to the trade shows, when you walk into a room, at least for me, it's always funny or fun to sit there and see the new kids look at me like, who the hell's this guy that knows everybody? You know?
Like who's this old dude?
Yeah, well, luckily I have good genes.
Well, it's funny on one hand and it's depressing on the other. Like, you know, your time is coming when like you walk into a room and there's people that have not heard of you at all. Now, it's not because I think we're so awesome that everyone should know our name, but in the trade conferences, like, look, you are you in the FSTA Hall of Fame? I think you are, right?
No. And that's a discussion unto itself. It's
right.
You know, there's cliques everywhere. I once saw somebody who wasn't in there, and the executive director said this guy should be in, and next year he was in. So it's not always on accomplishments, and that's not a knock on anybody specifically. That's a knock on how life works and how human nature.
Oh, sure, yeah, and it also ties into who you know, where you work now.
Like, right. You know, and I was never part of the clique. I respected all those guys. They respected me. But I didn't always hang out with them. And that's because that was 24/7. The first 5-6 years, I would go to those events twice a year. Right. But in between events, I was up in the room.
Right. You were grinding away. You were grinding away. Same here.
Exactly. And, you know, my website, mine and Ryan's website, we were ranked in the top 2,000. We had millions of unique users. We had all the major contracts, et cetera, et cetera.
KFFL.com was the website. And if you're a fantasy sports aficionado and you haven't heard of KFFL.com, shame on you.
Because you're a newbie.
that's like not hearing of the Constitution or the Bill of Rights.
That's because most people, after I sold it, or Ryan and I sold it rather, it was literally destroyed. They took away our premium model. Everything was free, which was not good. We were bringing a good chunk of change in through our premium subscription, but they wrongly thought they could exponentially increase our presence. What they were looking to do was to do a quick sale for about $150 million. And being a political junkie and an econ junkie and being your own business person. And here's the thing about life, and this is a good podcast unto itself. A small, successful business owner has more economic knowledge than an Ivy League graduate who's never actually had their own business.
Sure, I would agree with that.
Start to understand how the economy works. You innately start to understand and get a feel for bad times are coming. We've got to, put a few away here or there. And I saw these things and they were oblivious to it. And I remember at board meetings, I kept trying to warn them over and over and over. Right. And then they made, well, you know what, we're going to have a podcast.
I was going to say, let's have a different podcast on that, because quite honestly, that was going to trigger me into giving you my position on socialism and why it fails. It's precisely because of people who think they know how the economy works, but actually have no idea how the economy works. But
right. And that extends into government.
Absolutely. But let's not get started on that. Let's instead go straight into the podcast. William, I know we've got a great show today. We've got in my notes, and I'll kick it off with this and you can take it over. I see my notes. I see a woman with a dong? ?
You are not being politically correct, Mr. George Jopoulos.
Fair enough, but what's that all about? Tell us.
All right, everyone. This is our show for the night. We're going to talk about Lia Thomas and Brittney Griner. Is that how you pronounce it, Big John? Brittney Griner. Now, you probably don't know who Brittney Griner is, and that's part of the story in itself as we get into that. And then we're going to talk a little bit of an NFL. We are sports and politics here. We're going to get into the big news of today.
Right.
And that's news is Carson Wentz being traded to the Washington Commanders. And I got to be honest, it's odd for me to say Washington Commanders. I just got used to the Washington football team, which honestly, I kind of liked it. It was just brutally straight to the point.
Right,
Washington
right.
football team.
But you
So
sell,
let's get into
you sell more merchandise this way. Change the name 3 times in 3 years.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that is one reason why they always have all these throwback uniforms. It's about generating income.
Absolutely.
But let's get into Lia Thomas.
Yes.
For those of us or those of you who do not know who she is, Lia Thomas is a transgender swimmer who is competing with women. And as John said, she actually still has a penis, and we'll get into that. But for those that aren't sure, or let you toss the ball to you. Tell the audience what a transgender is, and then tell them what a cisgender is, because I had to look up cisgender. Yeah, I'm like, cisgender.
So, all right. So one of the things that make you special when you start your own political movement is that you create your own terms. And that's true of any profession, right? Like, there's a reason why doctors say this person is suffering from a hematoma instead of a blood clot. They don't say blood clot, they say hematoma, right? They'll say, right, because the more words you use, right, it makes you feel more important. So cisgender actually is what you and I would typically call as everyday people that you see walking around, right? They're people whose gender identity matches their birth sex. Okay, correct. I think that's the thing. Transgender means, to be honest with you, I'll give you their definition. If you want my opinion, I'll give it to you later. But transgender means your gender and your sex, meaning your identity of whether you feel male or female or somewhere in between, doesn't align with your birth sex. Right. So that's the difference between the two. And Lia Thomas is the case that, to put it plainly, because this is always confusing with the language, it is a transgender female, meaning the sex chromosomes are XY, which would define Thomas as a male, but he identifies as a female, therefore Lia Thomas.
Right, and his name was Will Thomas. And I'll be honest, to America, to all the critics out there, and even to myself, I always want to be respectful of people, but at the end of the day, it's about the truth as well. And everybody calls him a she, but she's still a he. She started. Lia Thomas started doing the hormone process about 2 years ago.
Suppression, right? So right, for the last year, he had the testosterone suppression in order to be able to comply with NCAA rules. But
correct. And he goes on to say, "I'm a woman, just like anybody else on the team," Thomas said. No. "I've always viewed myself as just a swimmer. It's what I've done for so long. It's what I love." Yeah. The problem I have with that is he's not a woman yet. I actually know a transgender and I respect her. I call her I call her by her name. She's gone through the whole process. She no longer has a penis. She no longer has anything. Very open about it. She actually educated me. And again, my belief on all this is simple. It's, we are born as heterosexuals in terms of our mating process. That as a species, that's what it is. But I also think people are born differently. As my friend says, most people are like a car with a hardtop. Then there are those who are convertibles, and I believe you're born that way. I believe it's. I'll agree with you on your intellectualism. It's very layered. It's not a black and white. It's not a kiss issue. It's very layered in all this. But at the end of the day, do you think she's a woman or do you think she's a man still?
No, he's not a woman, and I separate two things. And I know this is not the acceptable position. As a matter of fact, most platforms will deplatform you for something called dead naming, which is referring to the pronouns of the sex when someone has said, "I want to be referred to by these pronouns." Here's the difference. Lia Thomas, were I to run into this person, I would refer to them as Lia Thomas, because the name is something you choose. That is your,
good point.
as an individual, much like Caitlyn Jenner, right? You're telling me how you want to be referred to. That's a basic human right, okay? You don't call me Peter, my name is John, right? So don't call me Big Peter, call me Big John, right? So that to me is appropriate. What's not appropriate is an individual getting to decide for me what my perceptions and what my language is. To me, that's unacceptable. And it's even more unacceptable when the government mandates that you do it. So for example, Lia Thomas—
infringing on your freedom of speech is what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely. Because Lia Thomas is a he. If you've noticed during this whole discussion, I've referred to Lia Thomas as a he. And people say, well, why do you use the female name but refer to the male pronoun? Because to me, that's the situation we're in right now.
Well, what you're saying is she chooses to be what you're saying, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but understanding you're saying he is choosing to use the name Lia, which you respect.
Right.
But scientifically, by birth, by all the science, he's still a man.
Right. And because look, sex and gender, before we had this linguistic split, was always your karyotype. As a geneticist, was always your karyotype, meaning XX, female, XY, male. Now, there are very rare genetic cases where you have XYY, XXY.
Right. Like how do you say
hermaphrodites, genetic mosaics. There's a lot of these different terms, but you have to understand, statistically speaking, they're less than 1% of the population.
Right. They are the outliers, the exception.
Absolutely.
And the problem with society is they try to make that the norm. See, it happens to that person. So
well, they're using faulty association to say, for example, there are people—
I wouldn't say faulty. I would say they're using an outlier.
No, I'll say it's faulty, and I'll tell you why. Because in the cases where you do have the quote hermaphrodites or the gender mosaics or whatever, that is not a conscious choice on the part of the person.
Oh, correct.
Right? That is part of their genetic material. What we are saying here is that the former Will Thomas, now Lia Thomas, one day felt like a woman trapped in a man's body and said, I want to live my life as a woman. Which, by the way, as a libertarian, as an individualist, go ahead. And no one should stop you from doing so. And no one should otherwise like bully you, beat you up, whatever. All that's out. I don't believe in any of that crap. But at the same time, you keep,
you're like a big teddy bear to be so big.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The other thing is you have to also understand, to me, it's a mental illness. And I don't mean that disparagingly. I honestly mean that. So for example, body dysphoria. People say, well, it's not—
let's pause on that because you're getting into our next section here.
Sure.
Well, a couple of points. As a male, or I'm sorry, when she competed as a man with the men, her ranking, and rankings changed, but this is
roughly 50.
Yeah, she was ranked 462.
462. Oh, all right.
462. She's number one as a woman. She wasn't even competitive as a man in the 50 and the 100 meters. She could become the NCAA's first Division I transgender national champion in the female category.
And he set a record already.
Right. Oh, he set a number of records.
Yeah.
Now, knowledgeable notables, Martina Navratilova, Caitlyn Jenner, and Michael Phelps, they have expressed opposition, meaning they haven't come out and said no, but their language, they hem and haw like a politician. They'll say it another way. They're not really into Thomas competing with the females.
Right.
And critics say, and this is where you were going. Well, you weren't quite going there, but I'll have you talk on this. Critics say transgender women athletes have an unfair advantage. They have larger lungs and larger hearts and larger muscle. Now, the counterpoint to that, this will crack you up, is they disagree because they say cisgender people, some of them have larger muscles than their peers. What they're trying to say is it's okay for Lia Thomas to be a man that compete because not everybody can match up with Michael Jordan. And it's the same thing they're saying. They're saying Michael Jordan's God-given natural talent that puts him at a 10 and puts the average NBA player at a 7. It's the same thing as Lia Thomas in the female category. I found that laughable. But the reason I bring that up is that's part of the argument they're trying to use. Now, you're a scientist. People may not realize that you're a scientist. You would agree that men on the whole are faster and stronger. We have greater endurance. And as you said, sex is an immutable characteristics. I mean, what I'm heading towards is this is why Congress enacted Title 10, I believe. No, is it 9?
Title 9.
Title 9 in 1972. Is this something that you find persuasive on the other side to argue that just because okay.
not at all. Now look, I've often stated this in more comedic terms, but in actuality, look at this. If you were to line up the 10 best at any athletic event, okay, all 10 would be men.
Correct.
Just men, no matter what it is. Track and field, team sports, anything, lifting, powerlifting, running. Why is it that you have the male fastest man alive, say Usain Bolt, is what, half a second, 3/4 of a second, a full second faster than the fastest woman on earth?
Well, Lia Thomas, just to expand on what you're saying, she was beating her opponents like in one meet, beat like by 30 some odd seconds. But a comedian said it best, and I can't remember which. I want to say Dave Chappelle, but I don't think it was Dave Chappelle. He said, if women were the equal of men physically, there would be no WNBA. They'd be playing in NBA.
And there's a reason why the WNBA is getting lousy ratings. It's just not as good a product in terms of the athletic exposition. Now, here's the thing. People think that because it's a non-contact sport, but here's the principle you have to look at, right? In MMA, there's a transgender female.
Oh, yeah.
Fallon Fox, I think. There's a legitimate fear that he will kill a woman in the ring.
Right. That's
because, Joe Rogan explained it. Muscle mass is different. So even if you're taking, not taking testosterone, if you're taking testosterone suppressant, if you're taking progesterone and other female hormones, your muscle mass is still that of a man. Your speed is that of a man. Your endurance,
would you say this hormone replacement that they on, it's kind of like having a built-in natural steroid machine if you're competing as a transgender. What I mean by that is, unless you take the suppression, that testosterone is going to keep producing until you get a certain age.
Well,
and
you're right.
It's like a built-in steroid machine.
But you're right. But people seem to think, okay, we're suppressing the testosterone, that should fix it, right? No, because your formative years as an athlete were done under the male system, right? So your body during its formative years was getting more testosterone, had more muscle mass, was faster.
So you're saying the fact that Lia Thomas is taking the suppression, she's already built that body up to be able to dominate women.
And let's face it. When Martina Navratilova played, for example, tennis, the sight of her playing like against Chris Everett, I remember, right? Chris Everett was America's sweetheart, right? Right. But when Martina played Chris Everett, it was night and day. But no one for a minute thought that there was a man playing Chris Everett. And when typically, like even today, Serena Williams, they asked her, like, how would you fare against the man? She goes, I couldn't even beat the 100th ranked man.
Well, remember Billie Jean King. Billie Jean King, she wasn't quite, if I remember correctly, she wasn't quite in her prime. But Bobby Riggs was already like 50-something, smoking.
No, it's just the opposite. Billie Jean was in her prime.
Okay.
Bobby Riggs was.
But the point is, Bobby Riggs was already
in his
well
late
over
50s.
the hill.
In his late 50s. But
he was a chain smoker too at that point.
Yeah, but here's the funny part. People forget at the time. The so-called what was it called? The battle of the sexes, that tennis match.
It was in Houston. I remember that.
Two things you have to remember. Bobby Riggs was a degenerate gambler.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. He was a bum at that point. Maybe not financially, but physically.
Yeah, a lot of people think he threw that match for money, right? Because he was a gambler, right?
I did not know that.
Right. Now, the second thing you have to understand is also Billie Jean at that point was the #2 ranked player.
Who was #1? Chris Evert?
No, Margaret Court.
Oh, Margaret. Oh, God, she was
The
old. She
Australian,
was a little bit older then.
Yeah. And guess who Bobby Riggs had beaten a week or two before the Billie Jean King
That's
match?
right. He had beaten her.
In straight sets. Like, she didn't
That's
get 1
right.
point off of him.
That's
So
right.
even
So-
then, a 50-year-old has been.
So people, Big John here is saying it was fixed. in his opinion.
I'm saying there's the allegations that it may have been fixed. But anyway,
personally speaking, because we have to say in your opinion, so we don't get sued.
yes, in my opinion, and I'm saying that these are rumors that are repeating. But here's
in
the
your
other thing.
opinion, do you think it was
Yeah.
fixed?
But just to sort of put a bow on this, most people, if you ask them, should there be should transgender women be competing in combat sports, boxing, wrestling,
No.
MMA, karate, judo? The answer is hell no. Because
we're seeing it, as you said, in the MMA right now.
But it's so obvious to people. I think most people would look at that situation and say, no, 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 you can't. So then why do you think it doesn't apply to non-contact sports?
Because nobody's physically getting hurt. That's why.
Right, but it doesn't erase the natural.
No, I'm not saying it does, but that's why and right now the tail is wagging the dog. The people don't understand the gay community. I did some research on this. I don't want to digress, but I did some research on this, and they're a small group of Americans, but they've got one of the loudest voices, and when they get money, they use it wisely. For another podcast, we'll talk about Colorado and how all that panned out and turned a red state purplish blue, mostly blue now. Okay, so would you say it's fair to say that it's today's female athletes who are fighting for the right to be taken seriously? They're the ones whose rights are being trampled.
Well, I don't know if it's their rights that are being again, I'm as a libertarian, I'm very touchy about the use of the word rights. If somebody has to provide you something, it's not a right. So
well, it's the right to be able to compete and to be seen as the strongest, fastest, whatever female athlete in that sport. It's their right as women.
They still have that right. I think what you're complaining about, which
I'm not complaining, I'm asking.
Yeah, no. So they still have the right to compete. They could just choose not to compete against Lia Thomas, for example.
But which begs the question: so are those rights being trampled because a man is competing as disguised as a woman?
No, I think it's more the rigging of a game. In other words, in the name of political correctness, in the name of social wokeness, however you want to describe it, they are ignoring basic scientific analysis. That's the thing. So here's what I think the effective response is, quite honestly, is the cis females need to walk out and protest.
They can. Hold on. That's a great segue to the next topic of this. Well, first of all, my belief is for every spot on that team that Lia Thomas takes, there's a woman who's being thrown overboard.
I agree.
However, they're not protesting. They actually talked about protesting the female members, but a lot of them are there on scholarship. Some of them are working class people. The school has openly backed Lia Thomas to the point where the rules state that you only have to do your hormone therapy for 1 year, then you're eligible. So now they're talking about changing it, about, okay, certain testosterone levels need to be maintained, et cetera, et cetera. UPenn says, has not said, but they've hinted strongly they're going to take them to court. The coach of the swim team loves it. Why? I mean, he's winning. He's one who's, so you're talking about people giving up their livelihoods in terms of an education. And let's be honest, there's only one college system, university system, where the degree matters. And this is my personal belief, but I believe it with all my heart. I graduated from the Cal State school system. If you graduate from anything outside of an Ivy League, outside of, say, a Duke or Stanford, nobody gives a rat's ass when it comes to the networking. But when you graduate from these Ivy Leagues, it's a deep embedded network system built in. These are the people who go work in the corporate institutions that we're taught at college, but we'll never work at. That used to frustrate me. I was like, why am I learning this corporate system? I'm going to go own my own business. That's how it works.
Right.
The professor told me it's what I'm paid to teach. But my point is these women don't have that luxury to do that. Does that make sense to you, or you still completely disagree?
It makes sense to me, but I have an issue with the word rights. But
no, this has nothing to do with the rights. You're staging. They should stage. You're stating they should stage a protest. This has nothing to do with rights. I'm just telling you why they won't, because they have talked about it.
No, yeah? I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you in principle. So
let me throw one final caveat. This is what the school has said about anybody who has an issue. They suggested that upset swimmers should utilize robust resources available to them, including the university's Department of Counseling and Psychological Services. And what they're implying is you're an idiot, you're nuts, you need help if you don't want to.
They're implying that if you disagree with the fact that Lia Thomas is a man, that there's something wrong with you. Exactly. That it's your fault and you need counseling to get over it. But
right,
yeah,
exactly.
I 100%. Look, I'd be tempted to transfer out of that school if I was one of the females on that swim team or in that conference.
Transfer to where if you're there on a 4-year ride?
No, I mean you could transfer, right? Someone else can pick up your scholarship if you're worthy enough. But I understand it's difficult. I understand it's difficult. It's a difficult.
Exactly.
I get
exactly. It. Now, a couple more topics on this. Fixing a meet. There's speculation, and I believe this. If anybody who's done sports, we just talked about it 3 weeks ago, with Dennis Velasco, our NBA insider, about James Harden. It was obvious to everybody. He blamed his hamstring, but it was obvious to everybody he was tanking it. And one of the teammates said that Lia Thomas tanked it,
right,
at a couple of meets, just to make it look as if
another woman had beaten Lia Thomas, right? Exactly. To give justification for, I got you.
Any thoughts on that?
I don't know. It's an allegation, but
no. But do you think that based off the fact Lia Thomas is beating people at 35 seconds, 38 seconds, 12 seconds, all of a sudden there's another transgender who's going from female to male that beats him?
Yeah,
it seems very suspicious to me.
Yeah, I was going to say if Vegas probably would have had that as a long shot. Let's put it like that.
2 more topics on this and we're going to move on. And the reason I want to do the last topic is very important. Lia Thomas still has a penis. Do you think, are you one of these who sits there says doesn't matter, all equality is equality, or do you think a woman or even a man should be respected in the sense of not having the other sex in there? My take is simple. Culturally, that's how we've been brought up. It's a tough sell for a woman to have to accept a man, especially when our history has shown men go to jail for things like that.
You mean in the locker room?
Correct.
Yeah. I think that, look, there's the legal ethos and then there's the sports ethos. And like, if you've ever played on an organized team, in the truest sense of the word back then, what was your safe space if you were a member of a team?
The locker room.
A locker room. And the locker room was a place where, like, you aired out your grievances with your teammates. You could talk freely to each other.
That's right.
There was no, like, and I don't mean this in a sexual way, obviously. I just mean, like, what was that? Like, what do you hear a complaint of? Who aired our dirty laundry?
Right.
All that stuff has to stay in the locker room, right? So if you have women in that locker room who are uncomfortable. Now, you could call them prejudiced, you could call them sexist, whatever you want to refer to their attitude towards Lia Thomas. The very fact that his presence in their locker room is causing a team rift, as a coach, if not as a legal principle, as a coach, I would be like, can we come to an accommodation?
The coach sided with Lia Thomas. Of course, Lia Thomas is bringing him a championship.
Right, and he has to because of the athletic director's guidance on it, right? But like, I would try to come
no, you're talking about people who can walk out or do a protest. That coach can do that.
No, I don't disagree, but I'm saying, listen, to me, let's be practical. Can we have a section where Lia Thomas maybe is behind a curtain in the same locker room? Something, just to acknowledge that this is a weird situation.
I think they're a lot of them say Lia Thomas doesn't care. She didn't talk to the team. She just doesn't care. And by him just flowing his dong out, letting his schlong back and forth there, to me tells me that he's being disrespectful, because you're right. He could sit there and say, guys, I get it. I want to, let's make this work. But
so
he's
now,
done none of
so
that.
you see, William, now I understand why you sent me that prep note that said "woman with a dong?" ?
Dong just sounds like a comedy movie. It's like something in a comedy movie. And we've got to make this a little lighthearted. But you know what?
Yeah.
The pro Lia people, they're already killing us with their eyes.
Yeah,
but the most important part,
and here's the most important part I was going to say is we're not against Lia Thomas. You have to understand, like, at least we're not saying like it's a criminal act. We're not saying it's immoral to be transgender. Nobody is arguing that. What we are saying is it's an inherently unfair situation when you look. If you
you're moving into the final segue. What you're saying is to those who support Thomas, all they want to talk about is the transgender identity. To all of us, this is a sex-based issue, meaning she's competing in terms biologically, she's a man.
Right.
No matter how you want to cut it. The transgender community is all about the identity and nothing else matters.
Well, you know what, William, quick, just to give you like a sarcastic remark that will drive it home. If you were in the Paralympics, if you identified yourself as handicapped, would you be allowed to compete? So would someone with 2 legs who considers himself handicapped be allowed to compete against Paralympic athletes who are, say, doing the race in their wheelchairs, for example? Or is that
coming? It's somebody's going to claim it. They're going to have something minor, and they're going to claim it. People had the weirdest thoughts in their minds about winning. We are a society, we are a world ingrained in putting winners on a pedestal.
Right.
I see Lia Thomas as that's all that person wants. Now, the final point, and we'll move on. Jackie Robinson, in your opinion, because she has claimed, Lia Thomas has claimed she is the Jackie Robinson of transgenders. Now, one of the critics said, this isn't said that Jackie Robinson fought for rights, and he went from the Negro Leagues to the majors, an accomplished player in the Negro Leagues and an accomplished player in the
minor leagues. Yeah, too.
Yeah. Whereas Lia Thomas sucked in the male swimming team, but dominates. That this isn't a civil rights issue like Jackie Robinson. This is an issue of a man competing against females. And the person who I'm referring to, I won't say, but was actually quite disgusted at having that comparison made, in terms of it was demeaning towards everything that Jackie Robinson has done.
I was just about to say that. If I were a member of Jackie Robinson's family, or if I was perhaps an African-American, yeah, that would be insulting to me, because Jackie Robinson didn't choose to be Black.
That's a good point.
Lia Thompson chose to be transgender. Like, you can now, like, the fact that you think you're born that way is not the case. You chose to be transgender, in the sense that, listen, Lia Thomas, when you see him on the in the swim meets, I laugh because I can't help my baser side from coming up. He looks.
Oh, me too. It's like
a guy in drag.
No dog.
Yeah, there's like a bulge in the swimsuit. Like, there's, it's a one piece, obviously, right? So it's like, it looks comical because there's absolutely nothing feminine about his appearance. It's just that he has just decided to be referred to as a woman. And again, to the extent that he should be allowed to do that as an individual in the United States, absolutely.
Correct.
Competing,
I just don't think he should compete.
But being classified a biological woman in order to compete with other women. Listen, you always say this, Why is there never, why don't you hear this in the other direction? Why are there never any men complaining about transgender men competing against them?
That's
Why is
right.
that? Why don't you ever hear about that? Because it poses no threat to them, because it's still a female. That's
Well,
why.
let's
But
end it with this. After college, Lia Thomas says her eyes set on the 2024 Olympics.
hey, good luck.
I don't think
Good luck.
we are an extremely progressive society in all of Central and South America. I've been to almost every country, and it hasn't changed. The last time I was in Panama was a few years ago before COVID, and they'll never accept it. So there's
No.
going to be massive pushback on that. All right, let's move on to Brittney Griner. Griner. All right, first of all, John, tell us before we get into it, to prep the audience here, what is cannabis oil?
So sometimes you'll hear it as a CBD oil.
Right, hold on. John is a scientist, people. Listen
Yes.
up.
Trust me, people, I'm a scientist.
Run.
Okay, look, I have to admit, I love stupid movie references. That's from the original Ghostbusters.
Oh
Bill
my God,
Murray.
I did not know that. I thought you were mocking the government, you know?
No, that too.
What
Well,
Ronald Reagan said.
right.
Run if the government comes.
Yeah, that's my 2-for-1 there. It's a comedic reference and an anti-government. But anyway, it's commonly referred to as CBD oil, which basically, think of it this way: it's liquefied marijuana, but without the hallucinogenic, the THC has been removed.
Well, that's CBD, not hashish or cannabis oil. Cannabis oil.
Right, I said CBD. Right.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, the
Yeah.
CBD does not have any of that.
Right. So
It's
CBD.
legal in most states now.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm talking about the U.S. Obviously, the Russians have a different perspective on things. But generally speaking, if someone says I'm taking CBD oil, they're taking it for purpose. Like, for example, it's considered a natural remedy for seizures.
Well, it's a lot of things. People take it to sleep, for pain,
sleep, anti-seizure. There's a lot of uses for it that are purely medicinal, and it's very important to note that has no THC in, which
Correct.
is the psychedelic element of it. However, the hemp oil is basically cut with coconut oil and other essential oils, but it's basically, it does have THC in there.
Well, that's cannabis oil you're referring to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the difference
reason
between the
cannabis
two.
oil is because in my research, the terms are important when it comes to separating what has THC and what doesn't. I mean, already on Twitterverse, there's a few people, well, cannabis oil doesn't have it because they're confusing, doesn't have THC because they're confusing it with CBD, you know, but hers, what she had, the original report came out as hashish oil. So when I researched that, the other name for hashish oil is cannabis oil. So now they're just reporting cannabis oil, which has THC.
Now let's also state this is the Russian version of what happened.
Right. Now, before we get to the charges, though, who is Brittney Griner? A lot of people are really upset that and my initial take is you're upset at much ado about nothing, because the truth of the matter is nobody knows who the hell she is.
Right.
You know?
So to my earlier comment about the WNBA.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Brittney Griner, though, in the WNBA, Griner is a powerful force. She was selected #1 overall in the 2013 WNBA draft, 7-time WNBA All-Star center. She's 31 years old. This past year, she averaged 20.5 points a game, 20.5 points per game, 9.5 rebounds for the Phoenix Mercury. She made the All-Star team and led the league in block shots. I mean, she's an imposing figure when you see her in the uniform.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
She led the Mercury to the WNBA championship in 2014. She's a 2-time WNBA Defensive Player of the Year, 3-time Russian National League champion, and 4-time EuroLeague champion, and she has won 2 Olympic gold medals and 2 World Cups representing Team USA. She currently plays for the UMMC Ekaterinburg. I'm pronouncing it wrong without the accent.
Ekaterinburg.
Again?
Ekaterinburg, I think.
Okay, a women's basketball team that competes in the Russian Premier League. So that answers the question what she's doing in Russia. But the point is she's in her, it's kind of like in the fantasy sports industry. The first 15 years, there was nobody who did not know who I was in that industry.
Right.
In WNBA circles, she's a superstar.
Yes, absolutely.
The charges. Now there's video on this.
Yes.
You know, so people have already said, well, they're lying. They could, maybe it was spliced. We don't know, but they have video on it. You know, she was, and this happened before the invasion. She was detained by the Russian Federal Customs Service, who claimed to have found hashish oil in her luggage, and it was in the form of vapes. The incident was at Sheremetyevo International Airport, so in Moscow. She was taken into custody. An expert determined that the liquid is a narcotic drug, cannabis oil, as we've discussed, vape cartridges that they were contained in.
Right.
And the charges carry a sentence of 5 up to 10 years.
Right.
Now, the Customs Service didn't identify Griner when they stopped her, and they actually had held, she was actually held a few weeks before it became public.
Yeah.
You know, now the reason she's playing here, John, and I want to get your comment on Griner, but also on this, is she was earning about $1 million a year.
In Russia.
Yeah, about 5 to 10 times more than the average WNBA player.
I think it was actually 4 times her salary.
Right, 4 times her salary, but on average, 5 to 10 times more than the average. First of all, before we get to Griner, what are your thoughts on that, and why would you think your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts are nothing. It's a market economy, right? Like,
well, that's what I want you to explain. I know you're a libertarian.
Yeah. So she earned, let's use round numbers as they've been reported, and if they're not accurate, the principle's the same. She
Correct.
plays in the WNBA. Her salary in the WNBA is $250,000. In her mind, that's not enough to make a living, or maybe she just wants more.
That's about 3 or 4 times more than the average American.
Right. So regardless, and I'm not holding.
No, I'm just saying that's good money.
Yeah, it's good money, but at the same time, I don't begrudge anyone's how anyone earns a living, right? As long as it's not hurting somebody. So she said, and by the way, she's not the only WNBA player. I know Sue Bird has done it.
Most of them do. Most of them do.
They have to go overseas, right? They have to go overseas, right?
It's common. It's a common practice. For
yes, very common. So she ended up in Russia, where they're paying her $1 million a season. So she's making good bank. Now
she's performing for them.
Yes, and she's been there for 7 years, I think, playing for her Russian club team. Now, what's interesting to note is I've seen the argument that, you know, that's why we need a league minimum wage in the WNBA, because then these women wouldn't have to go overseas. And I'm like, no, that's
anyway.
First of all, that's not the way economics works. You don't decide this is what people need, therefore we set that as the minimum wage. That's how you get inflation. That's how you drive high unemployment. The reality is, you know what the minimum wage should be? 0. That's the real minimum wage. Because I don't care how high the minimum wage is, if no one's giving you a job, your minimum wage is 0. But anyway, so is it a reason to call for a minimum wage? No. Is it something that you could put a blame on, the situation with the disparity in pay? No. She went there to earn a living. She went there because she felt her skill set was undervalued in the United States, and she found a market for her skill set. Now, to me, that's perfect market economics. That's the way the world should operate.
Correct. 2 points. I think the reason you're going to get pushed back on the minimum wage is because we no longer teach critical thinking. If we taught critical thinking, people would actually think it through and come to your conclusion.
Of course.
2, they're wrong because there's only a handful of superstars earning the monster contracts. There's none in the WNBA, as we know.
Right.
So even if they did have a pay scale, there'd only be a handful of let's theoretically say they did implement all this, it would still only be a handful of players earning the $1 million plus. The rest of those players would still go to Europe, to Eurasia and play. So that's never going to go away. So those arguments to me are being done by, I'll say it, by sheep. people out there who look at everything but the actual truth
Right.
in terms of why things happen, how the economy works.
Yeah, it's a politically motivated excuse, quite honestly. It's meant to, and this is where I'll jump in with your conservative buddies. It really is meant to push a progressive agenda that, that the economy needs to be controlled from Washington as opposed to controlled by the market itself, right? So I don't buy that at all. I think it's a rubbish excuse. I think it's just a distraction.
Actually, John, I really think it's because of the lack of critical thinking, and people want to do what's right, and in their heart they think that's right.
Well, it's a humanist approach, right? Because
right, exactly. I don't agree with it, but that's I think a lot of progressive ideas. I mean, we all grow up progressive, wanting to save the world.
Well, the way I describe it is, it's as if my mother wanted to run the world, right? Because my mother doesn't understand economics, but she can't stand human suffering, right?
Well, here's part of the problem.
That's the issue.
Here's part of the problem I think she's going to run into in support. Right now, we are a very partisan, divided country.
You mean you're talking about Griner right now?
Griner.
Yeah.
What is she really, for the few people that know or have heard Griner, that sounds familiar. What are they referring to, Big John? Any idea? Did I stump the scientist? I honestly feel we should not play the national anthem. That's what she came out. That's what gave her first big publicity.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, yeah, she's been critical of the United States vis-a-vis race relations and what she views as a racist. I'm sorry, I just didn't follow your question, but yeah, she's made statements critical of American society. Now,
well, that was her biggest one. So,
yeah. But here's the thing: I don't begrudge her that, honestly. To me,
oh, I don't neither. I'm talking about perception of how she's going to be seen by half the country.
But here's the other thing too. I think she's learning real quick the difference between being in a nation that, as messed up as it is, believes in the rule of law, or at least did, or at least did before Trump became president. But
we're not going to go down that road. People, he's wrong.
I just said that to piss you off. But listen, we believe in the rule of law, right. Whereas in the Soviet Union, it's very clearly. It's the equivalent of a crime family, right? And Putin sits at the top.
Right.
He's the
it's an authoritarian government.
Right. He's the mafia don, and he runs it like
no. Call it what it is, an authoritarian government.
I don't even think it's that. I honestly think it's run like a mafia.
Well, it's a dictatorship run through Putin, through puppet governments, but it's an authoritarian. Yeah. And the reason I say that is because that's what they want to implement here. An authoritarian government,
sure,
where we have a figurehead, but everything goes through him, but it's elites calling the shots,
Yeah, and
because at the end of the day, even though he's killed some oligarchs, Putin has learned over the last few years he's got to get those oligarchs on his side.
Well, he's killed the ones that were a threat to him.
Exactly.
The ones that he's kept around are there to line his pockets.
Right.
It's a horrible situation, but as it relates to Griner, her problem is that unfortunately, I don't think there'll be a situation where the U.S. is going to change its policy in order to get her back.
Well,
I don't think that's
the progressives, though. To piss off the progressives, because you're going to hate hearing this, but Senator Lindsey Graham has come out saying we got to do everything, and the State Department is working. And the sad truth of this, because we've seen it in past historically, Jesse Jackson got some people free from Libya or the Middle East somewhere, and it was purposely done to embarrass, I think, Clinton at the time, but I can't quite remember, maybe Bush. But I can see her eventually being released in a way that embarrasses the American government.
Well, yeah, look, there's going to be the propaganda game, but I'm talking about meaningful concessions, like unfreeze our financial.
Oh, correct. That will be part of the process. That will be part of the talk.
Yeah, but that won't happen. I think there will be, we'll release her to like the most radical black guy in America just to make a point against the white society.
Right. That's what I'm saying. That's the minimum that'll happen.
Right.
They could get some concessions. Because some things are done through the back door that we never hear about.
I understand that, but yeah. Okay, we'll see how it plays out.
And the final comment on it, because it's just too much fun, the Twitterverse. Twitter has actually, and I apologize to those of you who do critically think, this is about the ones that don't. What if it was Tom Brady? Obviously, they're trying to reference the race. The race hustlers have come out. Right. But ironically, I follow a lot of conservative blacks, a few progressives, just to keep track of the bad guys.
Keep an
But
eye on
most of the answers are like, well, Tom Brady wouldn't have had any weed on him.
Right.
Tom Brady's rich enough; he doesn't need to go there. Tom Brady's not stupid. It was hilarious because I expected it all to be the progressives jumping on bandwagon, but they were realists. And the final note on this, and I'll let you have the last word, is nobody has come out from her circle of friends, family, or whatnot, said she would never have had that vape, the vaping pens. Not one person has come out, and the one thing that a cannabis oil is used for is for pain. She is an elite athlete. Let's not take anything away from her God-given gifts. So to me, I'm like, oh, I can see it, but it's also an abuse and disrespect of another country's laws. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, look, to me, there isn't a person on this planet that should be incarcerated, put in a cage, simply for taking any drug whatsoever. I don't care.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
No, I understand that. I'm just laying out my point, right? So, on principle, again, she should not be in jail. However, having been in the Soviet Union for 7 years, she should know how that
podcast.
Yeah, she should know how that system operates. That's like the people who visit North Korea and then get trapped behind there breaking some stupid law.
Oh, yeah, that China. He died. He died because he was an arrogant SOB. And I'm sorry to say that, but they think they're in America. They think that,
and 30 years ago was that kid in Singapore who got the caning, right?
That's right. That's right.
Because
in Singapore, they tell you, do not do this.
No, and they'll tell you, you bring drugs in here. And for those of you that remember the movie, what was it called? The Midnight Express or whatever, the one about the guy who got caught with smuggling pot in and out of Turkey and what he had to go through in a Turkish prison, right? So you have to be an idiot, even if you believe in the legalization of drugs, to try to smuggle things across a Russian checkpoint. It's just nuts. I wouldn't do it anywhere in a third world country, which is what Russia is. It's a third world country with a first world army. So yeah, I don't feel sorry for her at all. I feel sorry for her that she has to go through this, but not in the sense that she's been somehow
singled out.
Or being picked on or duplicitous actions. Look, the only thing that I hold out is, yes, we saw the video. Yes, they did take something out of that. Nobody knows what was in that bottle. Nobody knows. So whether was it hemp, was it CBD? We're only hearing the Russian prosecutorial side of it. So, but let's assume the facts as they've been stated. Yeah, she's not someone to get sympathy for in terms of her actions.
Right,
she's not a political prisoner. Putin will try to use her for that purpose, but
I think Putin is going to get pushback, because my assumption is she's brought championships. They're paying her $1 million. She's probably pretty popular in the basketball.
You're right. I hadn't considered that in Russia itself, she may be sort of a local hero.
And if Putin lets her go without asking for anything,
oh yeah, it's bad.
The support he gets from the people, that helps him tremendously.
I guarantee you, if it came to the point where she was walking without any concessions, she would have a heart attack in the jail cell. You know what I mean? I mean, you would hear about something like that, she had a heart attack or she accidentally hung herself. They might Epstein her. It'll be something that, which is horrible for me to say because I don't wish death on her. Yeah, but
I don't see any of that happening. This is too much of a strategic play for the Russians now. They're controlling the clock. They have a home field possession here. They're not going to screw this up. And the reason I say that is because I think it's going to portend to a good ending for her. She may have to wait it out, but that should happen. All righty, let's get on to our final topic of the night. It's more speculation in terms of what we think can and won't, or what or whatever can happen. But it's not speculation that Carson Wentz, his tenure in the city of Indianapolis as an Indianapolis Colt and the starting quarterback is over. He traded today for a second and third rounder in this year's draft, a third rounder in next year's draft. It can go up to a second round pick if he plays 70% of the snaps. Now, Big John, my question to you is, Frank Reich is a quarterback guru. I am of the firm belief that, hey, new system, new players, chemistry. He was a little bit of injury prone again this year, but 1 year to me with the talent this kid supposedly has, to me is like, we knew it. We knew that the owner was not happy. Is this a potential situation? Because this is speculation, but do you think possible ownership meddling with the front office and saying, I don't want him?
Oh, absolutely. So just to clarify a little bit, the net is that they got 2 third rounds, one of which will go to a second. The extra second that you mentioned is actually a swap because they're actually throwing back a second round pick to the Commanders. So the net is 2 picks. So when you consider that the Colts paid a first and a third just a year ago for him, they're taking a 2-round hit. So yeah, here's the thing. I do think ownership meddled, Irsay meddled, because you have to understand the Colts were a hot team going into week 17.
Oh, they collapsed at the end.
And then those last 2 games against the Raiders and the Jaguars, all they had to do was win one of them to make the playoffs. And they had Jonathan Taylor smoking hot. He was running over people. All Carson Wentz had to do was not lose games. And
do you think he lost those games? Or I kind of look at it as a team just choking.
Well, let's put it this way. When you give up a first and a third, that's the equivalent of drafting Trevor Lawrence, right? And like you expect.
You know what, though? It's also the equivalent of why the Colts suck and they've never won but one Super Bowl too. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. But
now, I'm not arguing with you as much as, let's be real. It's bad teams who haven't gone to the Super Bowl or deep in the playoffs traditionally, there's a reason for that.
Well, yes, but for example, with Wentz, you asked why those last 2 games, and was it a team effort? Do you know what his quarterback rating was in that last game against the Jaguars?
No, he sucked.
4.3. 4.3. No, do you realize that if I took 10 snaps in the pro NFL game as a nearly 60-year-old fat guy, if I just took 6 snaps, didn't fumble the ball, and just fell straight to the ground, I would have a higher quarterback rating than Carson Wentz had in that last game.
You know, it's a team game. Quarterbacks can make receivers, but those are the great quarterbacks. And Wentz is not a great quarterback. So, so how much of that is on the coaching and the team around him as well?
I don't think it's on the coaching. If anything, I think that maybe he was rushed back. Don't forget, he was hurt. And look, I think the season he had was very solid, right? It was his lowest interception total in a season in his career, right? So he took care of the ball for the most part. Was it overwhelming? I think he had 3,500 yards, 3,600 yards. So it wasn't like he had a great season, but he had a solid season. The problem was those last 2 games.
Right.
When you looked at the probabilities with 2 games to go, they had a 97% chance of making the playoffs.
Oh no, it was a stunner. In fact, that was the whole talk that week. They were interviewing players. I can't remember what station it was. He's like, yeah, we're thinking. Then we look up, we're like,
what the hell happened? Yeah,
was able to get into the play. Was it the Steelers? Maybe
the Steelers. It was the Steelers and the Raiders.
They were out. Some of the players. Yeah, we look up like, yeah, we're in.
It was the Steelers and the Raiders who backed in.
That's right. That's right. You know, I kind of view it as Irsay's meddling. To me, the Browns always get the flack, but I mean, the Colts are right up there with them.
Well, the Browns and the Bengals used to get that flack. I think they've turned it around a little bit.
But Bengal ownership never meddled. They just didn't care about building a winner because they were still profitable.
Well, they were cheap.
Let's face
it, they were cheap. They were hamstringing the GM by saying you can't spend money. But you're right. But so did they give up on him too early? Yes, I think they did.
Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, they did give up on him too early. Look, this might be a blessing in disguise for the Commanders because they're getting a potential starting quarterback relatively cheap. Like 2/3 is not a steep
price.
No,
they got to steal if he pans out.
Yeah, if he lives up
even as an average quarterback who becomes a game manager, Troy Aikman, then that's good enough for Ron Rivera.
I agree. And now here's the question I have for you: do the Colts now try to pull off a double whammy? Meaning, do they try to trade up to get one of the quarterbacks, like say, Willis or Pickett? You know,
Pickett. I was reading up on Pickett today, and he gets a lot of flack, but he seems to be
because of his small hands.
Yeah,
that's the main knock against Pickett. But also the kid from Liberty College, Willis, I think his name is. These are the 2 top quarterbacks I'm thinking. And would the Colts consider trading up to acquire them? Now they probably don't have the draft capital to do that.
It depends on who's ahead of him and their needs. If there's a team that
Well, they don't have a first, right? Because they gave that to the Eagles for Wentz, right? But so do they have enough draft capital? Probably not.
So they're gonna have to go out and get a quarterback. And,
right.
and let's be honest, if whatever draft picks they have left, Irsay will give him up. He'll tell his general manager. Is Griggs still the general manager over there?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, then excuse my French, Colts fans. I'm not gonna curse, you're bleeped. Why? Griggs gave up the world for a running back that the rest of the NFL and the evaluators had pretty much said never materialized or is done. And that was a kid out of Alabama, the first overall pick. Why am I drawing a blank?
Trent Richardson.
Yeah, they traded for him and turned out to be a man. And I was rooting for him because I
that was years ago, though. I mean, it shouldn't affect them now, but I hear what you're saying. Look,
no, my point is he wants to win so badly, he'll give up the farm. I mean, they did it for Wentz. So we got Trent Richardson, we got Wentz. What makes you think that they're gonna trade smartly? Yeah, right now, if I'm San Francisco, I'm like a rabid dog.
Yeah, I don't think the Wentz deal was bad. I think what's bad is that they're pulling the parachute cord just a year afterwards.
No, I agree, but it doesn't change the fact that they gave up the farm and got nothing in return.
Yeah, and now they're going to have to look for another quarterback. So whether they get Garoppolo, whether they think Watson's going to be available to them.
Watson's a potential nightmare.
But again, if they can't afford to get to trade up, they're not going to be able to afford Watson. So because Houston's going to hold out for multiple firsts.
That's a good point.
So they're not going to get Watson. So they're probably their main target is going to be Garoppolo. They might go after Mitch Trubisky. They might try to get him up and free.
Trubisky is a name that's been making the rounds.
Yeah, I hear the Giants are interested because there's a reunion potentially there with Daboll.
Well, honestly, I think Trubisky's one of these quarterbacks who was on a coaching staff that.
Oh, they killed his career.
He had a QB guru, but he sucked.
They killed him.
I mean, he wasn't. See, to me, it's like, oh, he's a QB guru. Who was it? Patrick Mahomes. Well, Patrick Mahomes is kind of like thriving big time without him. Maybe it was just coincidence he was on the same coaching staff.
Yeah, no, they killed it. They killed the start to this kid's career. If he can make it, great. Marcus Mariota is another one that'll be available.
Yeah, he's another one. I think that. See, the problem with Tennessee, I think their coaching staff sucks when it comes to quarterbacks. I think, and I think they lucked into Derrick Henry. Nobody knew who Derrick Henry that he was going to become Derrick Henry, that tank.
Right.
I think the Tennessee Titans are on limited time right now, and their window. The last 2 years were their windows. Well, maybe this year. Last year we were a bit of. But my point is, I think Mariota has some potential talent. I think he's like Wentz. He's like Jameis Winston after he left Tampa Bay.
There's another one. If he doesn't re-sign with the Saints.
I don't think he's going to with the Saints.
He might, but
they're talking about. I mean, actually, he's a perfect fit for Tampa Bay under the current coach, Bruce Arians.
Oh no, Bruce Arians. Why do you think he got rid of him to begin with?
No, but at the end of the day, Bruce Arians ain't got much of a choice now. And what's he got that he loves? He's got that big, deep arm.
Right, but Bruce Arians is
Bruce Arians.
But Arians is the one who got rid of Winston. He's not going to bring him back. Like, I think you have more of a shot of him picking up Watson, like being real players in the Deshaun Watson talks.
He's never had a player like Watson. And I don't think he'll let you. Arians, Peyton Manning, Big Ben. He's always had these big
quarterback
QBs,
big armed,
because he loves to go deep.
Yeah.
I don't know how strong Watson's arm is. I have no clue. I can't remember.
He's got a good arm. He's got a good arm.
But does he got that deep? Does he got the Michael Vick arm? The Big Ben arm?
No,
I don't know.
How many people do? Peyton
Manning, Big Ben.
Right. I would say that Watson is at least the deep ball thrower that you could put like below Russell Wilson. Like Russell Wilson's the best deep ball thrower, probably. I think Watson has the right arm. But look, he had DeAndre Hopkins all those years that he would go deep to. Will Fuller. Like, people forget, Will Fuller, like a 4.3, 4.4 guy, Watson never missed him deep.
Right. No. You know what, though? This is me once again getting us off topic. Let's head on back to Wentz. What does he bring to the Redskins? And what do you think of the current quarterback and how that stacks up?
I think that they'll
Taylor-
probably have,
Taylor or Tyler?
knowing Rivera, they'll have an open competition. I think
Yeah,
Wentz
those are
probably,
only.
if he's healthy, I think Wentz wins it. I think Heineke at least deserves a shot to compete. And I think he's a perfect backup quarterback, if nothing else. Like, I think you've solved your quarterback position right now. What they do with Fitzpatrick, who knows?
Well, Fitzpatrick is on the verge. I mean, the guy's an old man. He's your age.
At least.
But the point is that guy looks to me to become make the next transition into coaching. To me, he just has
You
that
would
type
think,
of talent.
yeah, you don't, but who knows with him, like, I
I
mean,
think you keep him around. I think because I think at the end of the day, I feel for Carson Wentz. I think his career's over. I think the perception of him is going to put him on a short leash, not because of Rivera, but because of the fans. Because Heineke became a fan favorite.
yeah.
They have Fitzpatrick, so they may be forced to get Fitzpatrick just to make it the 1-2. But that to me is a nightmare situation.
If it's not handled right.
Right. And you know what? And I'm not sold on Ron Rivera and his ability. Cam Newton really never progressed as a quarterback. His natural God-given talent and his size is why he's still in the league today.
Right. He never matured. It was just all. Yeah. It was all physical ability.
Exactly.
But here's the last thing on Wentz. 3 revenge games this year, 2 against the Eagles, 1 against the Colts. So he's actually got 3 revenge games in his first season in Washington. So that'll be interesting to see if that plays into the whole, like, how's he going to do? But he's back in the NFC East, which he's familiar with from his time with the Eagles.
Right.
So
I don't think that matters. I think that's always coaches change, schemes.
No, but I mean, for example, the stadiums are the same. So
no, I understand that, but I've always, maybe because I did sports, I just never, to me, it's like, it's kind of like when they ask a quarterback about, so what do you think about the quarterback face-off? And he's like, well, I'm not playing that. Is that quarterback playing defense?
Exactly.
What the hell should I care? That's kind of how I look at that. And with that, Big John, I think we are going to call it a wrap for the evening. We've got a great show tomorrow night, though, people. We're going to talk MLB lockout. And the truth of the matter is today came out. Week 2, I believe, is canceled of the season. I don't talk too much about it because I don't always side with the players because I don't believe in some of these. I don't side with the players a lot of times is because at the end of the day, just like the government, who pays the price eventually? We do. When it costs $200 to $400 to be able to take your family to a damn game and a $12 hot dog that's processed with cheap mustard, I have issues with that. But that's for tomorrow night. Big John, thank you for always being Big John, and to everybody else, y'all have a great evening, and we'll talk tomorrow.
Bye.